Yeah, it's funny. I smile as you were talking because, I was a senior official in the US government and I ran trade policy stuff. And that's when I first met Henry Kissinger. And this was little after the end of the Cold War. And he was the classic practitioner of foreign policy the way you just described it. It was geopolitics and it was security policy. And he realized that he wasn't really strong in economics. And when I got out of the government, he actually hired me to be one of the economics guys that he worked with because he felt he needed that. Flash, forward 25 years. And just in the year before he died last year, he started writing about AI. He realized that you couldn't do geopolitics going forward without doing AI. And that's been true of a lot of people. But just as a side question, one of the things that struck me, because, I used to be the editor of Foreign Policy magazine, I know a lot of these people, that's not where their training was. And so you go into a lot of foreign ministries and the vocabulary is unfamiliar. And the vocabulary of AI is one thing. And a long time ago, by the way, they had to learn the vocabulary of nuclear weapons, right? So it's possible to learn it, but the vocabulary of AI is one thing. Uh, Genomes and biotech are even more complicated. How are the people in other ministries that you're dealing with around the world coping with that?
So it's nice to see like some ministries and for example the state departments, they do have access to subject matter experts and they actually have the capacity and capability today to handle those important topics. Other countries are not there yet. Like for example, in the UAE's case, we are, I think, no, we are the first Arab nation that actually started this vertical in its Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So it's about also using subject matter experts to better inform foreign policy and making sure also the stakeholders within the sector also operate within the umbrella of the foreign policy. Because with these kind of technologies, responsible behavior, transparency, safeguards are important elements. And you cannot do it and ensure that these are actually applied unless you make the stakeholders within your domestic ecosystem understand how this is linked to your foreign policy. And these are foreign policy commitments also towards our partners. So in that sense, I think it's some countries are doing better than others or ahead of others. I won't say they're doing better, but they're ahead of others. And the UAE wanted to be ahead of the game, and it established this new vertical that I'm actually currently handling within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs almost 3 years ago. And because it realized the importance of tech diplomacy, important of access to technology, the important of access to know-how, and making sure that our commitments to our partners are also followed by our stakeholders, and making sure that our foreign policy also priorities are aligned with our national priorities in the science technology sector. So I've seen it in other nations, and they're doing well with it. And some other nations have not maybe paid attention to it yet, but I think sooner or later they will. And the UAE definitely identified the importance of this vertical within its Ministry of Foreign Affairs more than 3 years ago.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've written a couple of books on how the U.S. National Security Council works, and which was established in 1947 just to get everybody talking to each other. But in your government, for example, you have a minister that's doing AI. The National Security Advisor, sort of on a high level, is coordinating a lot of these things. You've got minister that does governance and other kinds of things. So across the government, you have a bunch of people with intersecting portfolios. Do you coordinate that? Is there kind of a technology security council function that helps ensure everybody's speaking the same language and setting the same goals?
So exactly when it comes to, again, international engagement and matters related to foreign affairs, so we are the office that makes sure that this coordination is happening at the federal level and local level also. Like the United States, the UAE, it has its federal government entities and also has local government entities, and they have their priorities, which is all aligned or under the umbrella of the federal government. But the coordination when it comes to international engagement and our foreign policy, that happens through our office. So we are working very closely with His Highness Sheikh Tahnoon's team, our national security advisor, with the ministry, with the minister of AI, with our Minister of Industry and Advanced Technology, and again working also with local government entities such as the Advanced Technology Research Council or the Dubai Future Foundation, or the Mohammed Maraf Space Center, and other entities that are operating under the science and tech ecosystem. And we do it as per the topics also, and we ensure that there is communication happening.
So let me pick up on a couple of the international issues. One is, again, going back in time to when I was a government official, we were dealing with globalization, and the challenge for globalizing companies was the world was a patchwork of trade regulations and regulatory regimes. And harmonizing those became critical because otherwise companies couldn't get to scale globally. We're now at the beginning phases of regulatory regimes. As you pointed out, you talk about your subnational and national levels. Here in the US, you have city level regimes, state level regimes, national level regimes. That's occurring around the world. And, until certain standards, certain definitions are established that are fairly global, it's going to be very hard for people even to estimate the value of new technologies because they won't know how to scale them. Do you feel there's the beginnings of a discussion about this kind of harmonization happening at a multilateral level?
Definitely, it is happening. And again, it's very reflective of the current geopolitical landscape, which is quite polarized. But sooner or later, I mean, the discussions should and will converge, and the UAE is playing a very active role in converging those discussions. As you mentioned, I mean, without having kind of a synchronized systems and a converged view, it'll be very difficult for people to work at the international level together. And for us to get the benefits of these technologies, it needs to be deployed at all levels. If you look at, for example, if you look at it from a geopolitical point of view and the polarization that's happening, there's a huge risk of having different set of standards and codes of ethics being developed by different blocks. So it's very important to have that discussion in multilateral platforms, and it's happening. And the UAE is really playing an active role in bringing the views and bridging the gaps between the different views. Because without it, we won't be able to get the most out of this technology.
One of the things the UAE has done is it said we are going to be close partners with the US. A few years ago, when the US started in this area, the policy of the US was kind of, we are going to lead the world. We're going to keep our technologies from going elsewhere, particularly China. There was the whole small yard, high fence strategy in that regard. Here we are 3, 4, 5 years later, and the world has changed. More countries have more access to more technologies. Competition is starting to look a little bit more like competition in prior technologies and prior eras. And so the question becomes, how does that affect a partnership like the UAE and the US? What are the goals for the UAE in working as closely as it's choosing to do with the US?
So, I mean, it's a really, really good question. And I mean, honestly, the answer to this question is that we cannot do things the way we've done it in the past. There needs to be a novel approach on how we work together and how we engage with our partners internationally. It's very important that we keep in mind that every country works towards their national interest. And I think when it comes to understanding each other and having these discussions, it's very important that we go into the deep kind of, understanding of how we operate, what are our priorities, what are our national interests, what are our concerns and the risks. And we cannot look at it from an emotional point of view. We need to be very, very objective and understand our partners' concerns also. At the same time, our partners need to understand our national interests and the priorities. So I think, given how things are developing and evolving, and it's always going to be linked to the global geopolitical status. The system that would have to be developed would have to cater to those again challenges and risks. which might bring some inefficiencies in which you might have to have like a totally separate system to be able to work with X, Y, and Z, in which you're unable to work with other partners, for example, with. But that's kind of the current situation, and might be the situation even in the future if the polarization stays. So, but the thing is, we need to adapt. We need to work around it. We need to put systems in place. We need to have kind of checkpoints that brings transparency to the relationships between nations. We need to put safeguards that protects the interest of our partners and our interest at the same time. We need to be less emotional about the way we address these challenges. And at the same time, we need to still focus on finding ways to converge views and bring nations closer with each other. Because the more converged they are, the more aligned they are, the more efficient we can be. The less aligned they are, the more inefficiencies can be. But sometimes you have to go with inefficiencies to be effective and to be able to deploy certain capacities and capabilities in a responsible and transparent way.